All right, Nick, thank
That's
you
good.
for joining me and chatting with me about bowling and sports psychology and working internationally.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Why don't you just give the viewers a brief intro to who you are, what you do, where you come from, and yeah.
Okay. My name is Nick Bohanan. I go by Nick. I am a bowling coach. I started out working for the United States Bowling Congress as a sports performance specialist. My background is in exercise science and athletic training, also in biomechanics, so more on the sports side, or the science side of the sport, sorry. And I worked at USBC for 8 years, helping out with the US national team and doing a lot of things in the supportive role for the team, studying how the body moves and finding ways to improve performance through moving better. And then that gave me the opportunity to go to Hong Kong for 3 years and help coach their national team. And that's kind of where I got more involved in the coaching aspect of bowling. I was doing a lot of mentoring under some great coaches in the US at USBC. And then when I go to Hong Kong, I'm able to do more hands-on coaching. And so I was there for 3 years. And then recently I have been here in Quincy, Illinois, back in the US, starting a men's and women's program at the college level. So I've been here for the last year.
So let's dive into a little bit about your work in Hong Kong. What kind of differences are there between now your work back in the US and working in Hong Kong?
There's a lot of differences. Stress level for me is a lot less. It's definitely, I mean, starting a program, there's stress of getting the program off the ground, but it doesn't even compare to the amount of stress that you have when you're coaching a national team and expected to win medals in order to secure funding for the program, for the funding cycles for, I mean, bowling's not in the Olympics, but as you know, in Asia, it's part of Asian Games. And so there's a 4-year cycle for securing money that's really important. And so there's a lot of stress that goes along with that. I would say that there's also a big difference. I mean, this is part of what we're going to get into, of how the interaction between administrators and athletes are. In my opinion, there's a lot more controlling aspect in Asia, especially at least what I saw in Hong Kong. Like athletes don't necessarily have a say in what they want. Some do. Obviously, like the top level athletes are going to have a say, but it's still, to me, compared to other countries, still very controlling. And what goes on, like there's other people controlling what they're going to do, and I know some of that's going to be a language barrier. Like there's things that are said that I have no idea what are said because they're not speaking English. So it is going to be a little skewed because of not knowing exactly what's being said.
So how did you deal with, for example, the language barrier?
It's challenging for sure at first. You feel like you're on an island, but as you build trust with certain athletes, they'll start to tell you what is being told, and especially if you can make a good relationship with the sports psychologist, they'll go out of their way to make sure that they keep you in the loop about what is being told. I mean, sometimes just because of translation, not everything gets like the full picture isn't there, but you get a very decent idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how it was for you in Malaysia, but there's definitely times where, like, if the athletes don't necessarily understand what you're asking, they just say yes.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets a little annoying, but I think as more you stick with it, ask the same question in a different way, you can start to get it. But it's still definitely a challenge, and I think there's a lot of missed opportunities in that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I definitely had that experience in Malaysia. You know, they kind of sports psych again at the beginning, and they're like, yeah, we'll just say yes to everything she asks us and we'll be okay. But then after a while, once they get to know you better, it's easier to communicate with them and get them to open up and kind of, it's building up. And then feeling okay that even if English isn't their first language, it's fine. We can still find a way to communicate and figure things out together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I felt like, I mean, I know that they're trying to improve, but it seems there's definitely a difference. It felt like in the approach between the Eastern and Western cultures about sports psychology. Like, to me, it just seemed more like they were focused on just doing their best, which is, I mean, it's what we do in the Western culture as well. But like it was like their thing. It was like if something didn't go right, that was what they went back on, was they tried their best, which is good. But it just seems like there might be a little, I don't know really how to explain it, but there's definitely a difference there than there is what we're used to here in the US. And that could just be that it could be the language thing where it just doesn't come across the same.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you relate to that.
Well, if I compare Germany, where I'm now, with Malaysia, for me, it's the exact opposite. Well, not with all athletes, but the few athletes that are open-minded in Malaysia were more open to it, but they had access to sports psychology for a long time. Whereas the athletes I meet here, they don't have that access to it. And so they're not really used to it. And there's still that stigma a little bit about, I only see a sports psych if I have a problem. And so I don't have a problem, so I don't see one. So I find here it's a little more challenging than I did in Malaysia. But again, Malaysia, because it was at a National Institute of Sports, since a very young age, they've always had someone. The sports psychology approach they've been used to, and the new school, there was a conflict there because they kind of are the stuff they had was, the coaches had that mindset is that, okay, you throw them in the jungle and they get out of it and they're mentally tough. And that's all we do before major competitions, And I'm like, there's other things too. And then I'd have athletes who go, yeah, no, all we do is talk. We don't really do anything else. Let's before a competition and you should take us to watch a movie. And so we're relaxed. I'm like, okay. It helps before, but it doesn't help you during the competition.
Yeah. And because really a lot of the experiences I've had with sports psychology and bowling in the US has been with Dr. Dean Hennitz. And it would be in our training camps for Team USA. And so he would come in and do different things. And it was more about team building. So coming together as a team, creating vulnerability and trust among the teammates, where I'm not saying that doesn't happen in Asia, but it seemed more individual based, and it could be just because of the formats. There is a lot more individual competitions that the national team is concerned about, where in the US we have a bunch of great athletes that are coming in, but they're coming in from the individual side and trying to create a team atmosphere.
Yeah.
They're not around each other all the time. I mean, they are, but they're competing against each other all the time, trying to make a living. So it's a little bit different, but the same at the same time.
Yeah. So did
So
you
yeah,
find the Hong Kongies open to sports psych, or like your assistant coaches or head coaches, the local coaches, were they open towards it? What about the athletes?
yeah, definitely they're very open to it. Because when we went to major competitions, we would, bring a sports psychologist along with us, and especially with the younger athletes, they would have weekly meetings with the sports psychologist. Um, and then there were certain athletes that would have meetings with them regularly. I know the women's team tend to use them more than some of the male athletes, but it was definitely open, and I had meetings with our main sports psychologist regularly. I mean, I'll be honest, later on, it was a lot for myself to just be able to talk and be able to manage the stress load. So
Yeah.
That would be my biggest suggestion, is that if you're needing it, to reach out and work with them, because then you build a better relationship for communication. So.
And what's it like with your team in the US now? How open are they? Do they have access to sports psych?
We don't really. We've had some individual meetings. Like, we don't have a sports psych on staff at the school. I'm sure that some of the bigger schools do, but
Yeah.
we're a small school. But we've had some team meetings where we've discussed different topics, and they seem very interested. Some of them have a past experience doing different things. So we've been doing trying to do some different things to help get I don't even know what I'm going to try and say. To try to move ahead and build some of we've talked a little bit, and I had them take some different tests to try and get an idea of where they're at right now. And there's a lot more I'd like to do. Time makes it a little difficult sometimes. Yeah. We've had some challenges this fall with COVID, so that makes it a little hard. But moving forward, I'd love to be able to get more involved with it. Okay. And I know, like, they all have to take an intro to psychology class. Okay. I'm pretty sure. Okay. And they have to take a theology class as well here. So I'm sure that helps.
Yeah.
But being able to apply it is a little bit different as well.
Yeah, true. So I kind of think this has already been answered, but one of the questions how important is sports psychology in bowling?
It is extremely important, because I know that a couple of coaches have, not considered, but described it. It's very similar to golf, where we take, 4 or 5 seconds to make a shot, and then you're waiting around 5 minutes before you take your next shot.
Yeah. And
so there's a lot of time to ponder on negative things, or be completely distracted and off task, into where your next shot is less than desirable.
Yeah.
So there's definitely areas, and once you start worrying about things, where you just start changing your mechanics of what you're trying to do, and makes shots even harder to replicate. So yeah, extremely important.
All right. Yeah. So do you have any advice for, like, I know you've having lived in Hong Kong and now being back in the US, any advice for coaches or athletes who kind of want to work abroad, train abroad, how to kind of integrate and make that transition a little easier? Or how did you?
Well, yeah, I would say, well, if you have any questions on whether you should do it or not, you should do it without a doubt. It's one of the best experiences I've ever done. Just being able to live in a different culture and learn. And really the best advice is to get involved with the local culture and learn as much as you can, and just kind of surround yourself and become part of it. Try and learn the language. They appreciate it. It makes it a lot easier. But yeah, really it's just about, finding people locally that can help you. And that can go a long way in learning what your athletes are trying to find, or if you're an athlete, what the local coaches are trying to do. Yeah. If you learn kind of where they're coming from as a culture aspect and for their expectations. Yeah. But yeah, basically just to try to surround yourself with as much opportunity and learning possibilities as possible.
Yeah. I find that athletes or anyone appreciate it, that if you try to learn the language, even if it's just simple greeting and asking how you are, you don't need to go more. Just them seeing that you're making an effort plays a huge role in them kind of going, okay, at least they're trying, so let's help them out a bit. So.
Yep, absolutely.
And then the food. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, Jen, I don't even. But yeah, just so that you're willing to give the time to them, your time to them, and that makes them give their time to you. Really, is what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
But yes, food.
I mean, I don't know about Hong Kong, but I know in Malaysia everything rotated around food. So the best way to meet an athlete or a coach was, okay, let's go for some food, and I'll try whatever you guys. My motto was always, you pick whatever we're eating, I'll try it, and then if I like it, great. If not, okay, then I know I won't take it again. But it was all like a thrill for the athletes to see that I was willing to try everything and anything. And when we went for banana leaf, for example, that I was willing to eat with my hands, that I didn't always eat with cutlery, that I was okay to adapt, because fork and knife is not really something they use in Malaysia. It's spoon and fork. So being able to adapt to that, or chopsticks. I was okay with using chopsticks, but I know a lot of my colleagues struggled and nearly starved to death because they wanted to integrate, but they just did not know how to use chopsticks for a while. So that all, it showed everyone that, we're trying to integrate ourselves and be part of this. And so we were accepted a lot more quicker.
Oh, for sure. Like, I went to lunch with a few of them in Macau, one of my first competitions that I went with them, and they were handing me a fork. And I'm like, I don't need a fork. I can use chopsticks. I already know how. And that got them really excited.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, when I was getting ready to leave and come back here and just going, like, I think I went to dinner 6 times with different groups of athletes. And so, and the food is great. So it makes it even easier when the food's really good.
Yeah.
And then yeah, and they like it even more when you are excited about eating the food that they grew up on. So
yeah,
I love dim sum. It's awesome.
Did you ever have to eat anything what we Europeans or Westerners would consider like odd? We went to Hong Kong. I think the Asian champs that we had on Hong Kong, you weren't there yet. One of my guys won, and then we went for a victory dinner, and I had to eat fish intestines, goose feet, and all that kind of stuff.
I tried a couple of things.
Okay.
But it was, I tried the century egg in Hong Kong, which is, I didn't care for that, but that was actually before I moved there.
Okay.
when we were in Singapore, we went to some place for dessert, and it was like some gelatinous tea thing, and I was not a fan of that.
Yeah.
But no, I never tried chicken feet or pig's feet or anything. They didn't force me to try any of that. So
they were nice to you.
What was funny?
Good to know.
Yeah. And what was funny was that when we would have our press conferences, they would all be local food, but I would have a steak in front of me. So that was awesome. So, I mean, yeah, so they catered to us as well.
Yeah.
The steak was good.
All right. How do you feel your time abroad has kind of helped you grow, change you as a person, as a coach?
Definitely, it has helped me put things together, and also be more open-minded about different things, and probably more patient. Having to, learn how to adapt and deal with athletes that don't understand what I'm saying. So I had to learn how to say it differently, and even learn how to communicate with people that don't speak English. Because a couple of our athletes didn't speak English at all. So, but I still felt like I could communicate with them and get them to do more of what I want to do, not all the time, more often. And so I think it's just helped me to become more patient and well-rounded, and hopefully a better coach because of that. I hope I'm a better coach, and that that will translate back to helping younger athletes and help them become better. And if I had the opportunity to go to another country, it would be hard not to say no to that. I mean, I'm not saying that I want to leave where I'm at right now, because I have a lot of time invested with these athletes, so I want to give them everything that I have. But it's a great opportunity to coach internationally, and it's fun, and I'd love to be able to do it again sometime.
I know now with COVID and everything going on, what kind of challenges are you facing now with all of that with the athletes, especially from a sports psych kind of perspective? How do you think it's kind of impacted the athletes?
I would say it's been a huge challenge. Well, for example, we got shut down twice this fall. I had a couple athletes test positive, so they were quarantined for a couple of weeks, and then right after they got back, I tested positive, so we got shut down again. And I know there's definitely a lot of frustration, because the rules of what to do are constantly changing, and so you constantly have to be adaptive, and it can get frustrating after a while, because you think you got it figured out, and then you don't, and you never have it figured out. And so it just takes a lot of stress to do that. Plus, we had a shortened semester. So we have Thanksgiving break in November in the US, and a lot of schools were doing in person from August till the end of November, and then they were doing it online for the rest of the semester. But here we were cramming it all into and being finished before our Thanksgiving break and the end of November. So there was a lot higher workload for the athletes, and so it was definitely a struggle for them to keep up with that and be able to bowl. And obviously their social interactions are a lot different now, and so they don't have that ability to blow off stress like they usually do by being able to hang out with friends as easily. So now they're constantly having to be worried about if they're being safe and doing it right. And so I know that definitely adds a toll to it.
Yeah, definitely.
And then there's also the you're training, but you have doubts about whether you're going to compete. And so it makes it harder to, to focus on putting in all the effort if you don't know when it's going to happen. So it's hard to build up and periodize for a competition that you don't know for sure that's going to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a challenge that a lot of people are facing, athletes are facing, that, we don't know when life is going to go back to normal. I mean, in Germany, we're experiencing another lockdown, so there's no training, nothing going on. So it's getting the athletes to kind of adjust and adapt to that, and, try and see the blessing in all this. So, looking at still the benefits and opportunities, even with all the challenging times we have. Kind of where can you improve little bits and what can you tweak, what can you work on? And so focusing on that, then focusing on what you cannot do. Yeah, it's kind of been interesting.
Yeah.
Getting that.
Yeah, so we've just been and so with that, we've been trying to focus more on education as well, learning different aspects. But even that's hard when you you don't have the time to apply it and see it for yourself.
Yeah,
it's one thing to see it in a video, but totally different to feel it and see it for yourself.
Yeah. All right. At the beginning, you kind of mentioned a couple of the challenges, language being one of them. What are some of the other challenges you faced working in Hong Kong, or the different challenges, and how you overcame them? Because I know it wasn't always easy for you in Hong Kong.
Yeah. I wrote down some notes. Let me see what else I wrote down.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of mixing and jumping with the question 3 originally planned as question 3. So I'm just kind of like.
Yeah. So I would say that, besides the structure of, Hong Kong was very hierarchy-ish. So you have to fall in line, and where definitely here it's more kind of open. So there's that challenge. It's just, learning the system and finding out where your boundaries are, I think is would be a good way to put it. And then I mentioned with the pressure. Yes.
Yeah. So how did you, because I know like that the hierarchy and the athletes basically don't question anything. They don't really think for themselves. How did you cope with that? Because your coaching style is very different. So what did you change to kind of adapt to the Hong Kong way? Or how did you try and get the Hong Kong athletes to kind of go more with your way of coaching?
I don't think I really did. I think it was more that I had to adapt to them. And I wouldn't say that the athletes don't question, but I think they do.
Okay.
I think that they just don't have a voice and the ability to change. I would say that, because one of the things I put down is I felt like I lost myself for a while as a coach and person due to the pressure. And so I would think that I definitely conformed to try and fit in within that boundary. And so, a lot of it is also talking to other coaches of the other sports teams, especially the ones that have been there longer. They've also learned how to adapt and survive. And so really that's what it is, about adapting and surviving, because it's the high pressure, because there's definitely been a lot of coaches in all the sports that have come in and gone and moved on because of the stress and the desire for within the country to win, which I'm sure that's the same everywhere. There's definitely pressure to to succeed. It's just about your ability to manage that pressure and stress. And I probably didn't do as well as I should have, but I'm hoping that I learned from that and I can better handle that in the future. Yeah, that's basically what I wrote down. So,
okay. So if you were to go back to Hong Kong now, what would you do different? So from what you have learned, what would you change so that you don't lose yourself and your identity and kind of drown in everything, that pressure that they have on you?
Probably just try and fit in, still be yourself, but don't over exceed and overreach. And just try and fit in and do what they want. Because it would be a lot easier just to do what they want. I know that sometimes that's not as fulfilling personally, but and just but if you can do it, implement your changes, but just do it more gradually. Gradually build up success and then slowly add in additional things, and it'll be a lot easier than just going in and changing everything right away, or you can't really go in thinking that you're going to change a program around. You gotta do it in small stages.
Yeah, I also found that it helped when I let them know that I don't know everything, because they always have, I don't know how it is in Hong Kong, but in Malaysia, that some of the people had this view. They think because I'm an expat, as a foreigner, I come in, that I think I know everything, and so I expect you to follow me and listen to me. And I'm like, no, this is a two-way street. I have to learn about your culture, and so we need to find a blend.
Yeah, and you have to communicate.
Yeah,
I didn't communicate with the right people. Sometimes I felt like they didn't want me to communicate with them, but they really did. So that was kind of threw me for a loop. So yeah, just definitely, it's better to ask too many questions, is what I've learned. So
yes,
and yeah, like as you said, don't act like you know everything. Act like you don't know anything, and it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah, for
sure. Yeah, I would definitely say that was the same there as being an expat. They expect certain things. I mean, well, even because like there's the thought process that you're a coach here, so that means that you have to be one of the top coaches in the world. So you should know everything, but they don't want you to know everything at the same time. So there's definitely a balance to it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anything else that you think the viewers might want to know about living abroad, working abroad, bowling, psychology, that you think is important, or you want to get off your chest?
No, I think that covers everything. Covers everything that I wrote down. Okay. So I would say, other than I would reiterate, even though sometimes it sounds negative, still do it. It's a great experience, even if it is full of stress. It's stuff that you can look back on and learn from. So absolutely, always do it. Frank Buffa, who is a bowling coach, he's from Canada. He said a few years ago that if you ever have the opportunity to coach internationally, you should do it. And I'm going to quote him: if you have a chance to go internationally, you should do it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it helps you grow as person, but also learn about yourself, because you are definitely thrown into a completely different culture. I mean, especially like Germany or Malaysia or US and Hong Kong, it's like they couldn't, in some ways, they couldn't be further apart, but you still do find similarities and you kind of try and work on those. But yeah, it's just, it made me grow as a person. I, you know, kind of worked on my resilience, because like you said, it's, I mean, I didn't know anything about bowling. For me, bowling was beer, pizza, and you go to the bowling alley. That's for me the definite. That's what I knew about bowling. And suddenly I'm like, you're working on with the podium athletes. I'm like, bowling, okay. And then you meet them. They're like, no, you need to understand the oiling pattern, the ball, and I'm like, oh, sugar. Okay, cool. Let's work my way in this. And so yeah, I know I asked a lot of questions, a lot of dumb questions, but I always kind of told them that this is kind of my job, is to ask all the dumb questions, the stupid questions, because that's how I better understand what's going on and how I can better help you guys. And I think that helped as well. And just being open and honest with them and letting them know I have no clue about bowling. And I think over the 2.5 years I worked there, I kept on learning about bowling. The competitions were like, they kept on telling me, oh, you know, the official competitions are so different to the other ones. I was like, okay, sure. But it is, because everyone is stressed. The athletes, the coaches, the assistant, the whole team that travels, is just like so much energy and so much stress and so much pressure on them. You're like, okay, I'm not the sports psych only for the athletes and the coach. I'm kind of taking care of everyone that's traveling with us. Kind of go, okay, take a deep breath. It's just a game. Let's just remember that, you know, it's bowling. You roll the ball and hit as many pins as possible. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, we'll work on that till we get there. And
yeah.
And
yep, as my friend Brian O'Keefe always says, that I think Rod Ross said it too. I don't know who said it first, but we want to stay behind the foul line, keep it on the lane, and hit the pin closest to you. So
yeah.
just a shout out to Brian. I'm actually going to visit him today. So
Oh, nice.
Just a shout out to him. So, and Shannon too.
How far are you with the furniture?
They are loaded up in my car, ready to go.
Well done.
Yes. Yeah. I built them a pair of rocking chairs so everyone knows what we're talking about. So.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's definitely a different experience. And I think I learned a lot by kind of working in that environment and, you know, trying to get them all to ease off, and then having to deal with that where you have an athlete who's saying, no, the ball I need to play is X, but coach is telling me to use Y or A. And you're like, okay, how do they deal with that? Because they're not the type of athletes that will go against what the coach is saying. So it's them having to kind of deal with that, you know, internal battle. They think that's better, but he's saying this is better. And so it's trying to get them to kind of, yeah, deal with that internal battle.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of that as well. And so that's kind of where I tried to adapt for this coming season, is be more open with the athletes and let them tell me as well what they're feeling. But, you know, that takes a lot more work as well, because that means that we need to practice that in training, so that I have to have understanding of all the athletes' equipment, and they need to have understanding of their equipment as well.
Yeah.
And knowing what, you know, all the aspects of adjustments, which is just going to make them better in the long run anyways. Yeah. But it does take a little bit more effort to be able to do that. Because especially, you know, because I'm dealing with college age athletes right now, and so they're coming all from the high school level, where those coaches are basically just tell them where to throw the ball and what to use. So it takes a little bit of an adjustment for that. Yeah. And so, but we're getting there. I mean, I don't think that's special from any other bowling coach. It's just I have seen culturally though that wasn't a factor, and I don't want that to be a factor here. So that's definitely something that I never would have realized before without coaching internationally.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also you just make great friends that you keep in contact with.
Yeah.
So I still have plenty of friends in Hong Kong that I talk to, as among other countries that I visited and worked with several coaches of the other countries that we competed against. So it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I definitely found that was one, having worked with different sports, bowling is quite a close-knit community. So the first time I traveled, I was an outsider, but by the second time, they're like, oh, the shrink is here. I'm like, yep, it's me. And so, by the third time, they all knew who I was. Like, even people I've never met already knew who I was. I'm like, oh, she's the middle-aged sports psych. I'm like, yeah, it's me. So yeah.
Yeah.
That was really awesome. And like, I'm in touch with a lot of people across the globe from bowling. I'm still in touch with a lot of my Malaysian athletes as well. But yeah, that was a nice thing about the bowling community, that once you're in, you're in. So it's like you meet people and they take you along and feed you, and you really stress because they understand, because they've been in the environment longer than I have, and they go, yeah, I know he can be difficult. We understand, and this might be a good way to approach him. And you're like, okay, cool.
Yep. Yeah, there's definitely there's a lot of coaches that have been in several different countries. Yeah. So some countries are who's who of coaches. So it is a lot of shared stories and experiences that make it even more entertaining. And it helps you keep it real, that it's not the end of the world if something happens. It's just bowling. So or it's just sport, it's just life, whatever.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Nick. This was really interesting. It was good to kind of get your perspective from living abroad, as it being your first time. For me, it's kind of like the norm to live abroad. It's actually more challenging having moved back home. How was that actually, moving back home for you?
Oh yeah, I felt like I'd been on a different planet for 3 years. Like I had come back and visited a couple of times, but I just felt displaced. Especially like coming back and trying to recruit. I would talk to coaches and they'd be like, oh, you should check out this person, and this person. I'm like, I don't know who those people are. And it's like, where have you been? I'm like, I've been in Hong Kong. I've been in Asia. And so, but like, yeah, a lot of things have changed in the last 4 years. And you don't think about it when you're around it, but when you aren't around things and come back, it's like, oh, this is a lot different. So it took I think it's taken really the entire year that I've been back to really feel like I'm back to being a U.S. citizen. I felt like I wasn't one for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a big adjustment too, Jazz, just coming back to what you feel like should be normal. It doesn't feel normal once you've been gone.
Yeah, definitely. I can sympathize with that. It's 2 years now and I'm still feeling like the foreigner here, but then I never really lived here. So yeah, for me, it's just like, it's still challenging. I still kind of call myself a foreigner. I'm not a German. I'm a foreigner here. It's like people look at me. I'm like, yeah, I don't, I sort of speak the language, but yeah, there's things I do differently. So I don't really have the certain, certain behavioral traits that I have are more international than they would be German. And so there's still a few barriers.
Yeah. There's just, certain words like, I don't use restroom anymore. I use toilet. And so, because that's what's used in So people here look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, sorry. Or they just laugh at me. They think it's funny. So just the small weird stuff. It really,
Yeah.
it's usually, and it's just the small stuff, but it's just a bunch of it that makes it feel weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I find it's always the smaller things that play such a huge difference. And it works both ways. It's the smaller things that kind of might make you feel odd, but it's also the smaller things that will get you far in life. If you, like bowling wise, if you work on the smaller aspects and fine tune those, it will help you a lot more, because we're talking about having those small gains. And it's the same the other way around. It's just that, I remember living abroad, I would miss some, German breakfast, we have is just, and now that I'm here, I'm like, I'm craving for Asian food. Like I keep on sending Sin Lee Jane messages about how I miss the duck and pancake stuff with plum sauce, and so she sends me pictures whenever she has it. I'm like, I want it now.
Yes, that is delicious as well.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I miss the food as well. There's a lot of good food in Asia.
Yes, there is. And they use spice. They don't use spice here in German. Every time I go out for food, I'm like, okay, can you make it like spicy the way you would if you were back home? And they look at me and they're like, huh? I'm like, yeah, not German spice, like spicy the way it is back home. Okay. And they still don't get there because they're so too scared that they're gonna kill me or something like that.
Yeah, it took a little while to get adjusted to the food, because it's, there's a lot of Asian restaurants in the US, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
And so now I think I crave more the real Asian food as opposed to but I will still eat it all here as well, just because it helps remind me of what I used to have. So
yeah. All right, I think that's everything from my side. If there's anything from your side?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you very much for chatting with me about this. I always love talking about sports psych, but I also love that whole international aspect from it, because I think people can learn, and like you said, it's moving abroad is never a mistake. It's only something that will help you grow and become a better version of you. It's challenging, but that again, these challenges help you grow and test yourself, your limits, and see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. Yep. It'll definitely help you learn who you really are, or who you want to be, at least. So
yeah.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much. And let's see if I figure this technology out, and if I can stop us live on Facebook. So everyone watching, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, just post them in the comments and we'll answer them if we can. Well, when we have time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.